is, my wife is, my mother-in-law. You got the wrong guy.
For 9 seasons, All in the Family held America's attention like no other show. From 1971 to 1979, it wasn't just entertainment. It was the dinner table conversation, the water cooler debate, the mirror held up to a changing nation. But behind the laughter and the groundbreaking episodes, something else was happening. Cast members were walking away from one of the most successful shows in television history. Some left for bigger dreams, others for creative freedom, and a few simply because the time felt right. These are the stories of every All in the Family cast member who left, and why. Number 6. Rob Reiner and Sally Struthers.
Exactly what I had in mind. Come here.
No, not now, Michael.
Why not?
I want everything ready for when...
The departure that changed everything happened in 1978, when both Rob Reiner and Sally Struthers left after the 8th season. For viewers who'd spent nearly a decade watching Mike and Gloria Stivic navigate marriage, parenthood, and constant battles with Archie, their exit felt like the end of an era. The show would go on, but it would never be the same. Rob Reiner had been playing Michael Meathead Stivic since the very first episode on January 12, 1971. The role made him a household name, but it also became a golden cage. The nickname Meathead, given to Mike by Archie as a way to dismiss his son-in-law's liberal, educated viewpoints, stuck to Reiner like glue. Years later, he'd joke with a mixture of pride and resignation that he could win the Nobel Prize, and the headline would still read, "Meathead wins Nobel Prize." By 1978, after appearing in 174 of the show's 202 episodes, Reiner was ready to step behind the camera. The truth was that Reiner had directing in his blood. He'd grown up watching his father, the legendary Carl Reiner, create and star in The Dick Van Dyke Show. Comedy Genius had hung out at their house when Rob was a kid. Mel Brooks, Neil Simon, all the great comic minds of the era. Rob had started his career as a writer on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour in the late 1960s, working alongside Steve Martin. Acting had been good to him, but behind the scenes was where he wanted to be. During his years on All in the Family, Reiner had been learning. He'd watch how scenes were blocked, how Norman Lear worked with actors, how the writers shaped episodes. He even wrote 3 episodes of the series himself. Carol O'Connor, who became something of a mentor to Reiner, had been encouraging him to make the leap. O'Connor understood what it was like to have bigger ambitions than just showing up and saying your lines. Sally Struthers, who played Gloria, was just 24 years old when the show premiered. She'd already built a resume that most young actors would envy. She'd appeared in 5 Easy Pieces in 1970 alongside Jack Nicholson and Karen Black. She'd been a cast member on the Tim Conway Comedy Hour, but All in the Family made her a genuine star. She won 2 Emmy Awards for the role, both in the mid-1970s. By season 8, though, something had shifted for Struthers. She was in her early 30s now, and she was what she later described as itching to leave. In an interview with the Chicago Tribune years afterward, she explained her mindset at the time. "I was young, energetic. I figured I could go off and do anything." The voices around her were pushing her toward the exit too. "I listened to a lot of my contemporaries who considered themselves artists, and they were telling me that I should stretch myself and prove myself. And then you always have yes people around who tell you, look what this one's doing and that one. You can do it. You can do all that exciting stuff." The truth was simpler than most people realized. Both actors' contracts were up at the end of the 8th season, and they had, as Struthers told TV Guide, other fish we wanted to fry. There was no backstage fight, no creative dispute with Norman Lear, no salary negotiation gone wrong. They'd done 8 years. Their characters had gotten married, had a baby, grown up together. It felt like a natural stopping point. Jean Stapleton, who played Edith, remembered a conversation she had with Struthers as Sally prepared to leave. "I remember saying to her, I hope this isn't the biggest mistake of my life," Struthers recalled. Stapleton, who'd had a long career in theater before television, offered reassurance. "Oh, Sally, darling, you started in theater. It doesn't much matter what happens in this world of television or film. The theater will always welcome you back with open arms because it's your home." Their final episode, broadcast on March 19, 1978, was titled "The Stivics Go West." Mike had gotten a teaching position at a college in California, and Gloria and little Joey were going with him. The episode showed the family packing up, saying their goodbyes, preparing to leave the house on Hauser Street where they'd lived for 8 years. The goodbye scene between Carol O'Connor and Rob Reiner is one of the most genuinely emotional moments in sitcom history. Archie and Mike, who'd spent nearly a decade arguing about everything from politics to personal responsibility, have one final conversation. Then they hug. The tears were real. There was no acting, Reiner said years later. There was just no acting. You didn't have to act. I mean, I looked at Carol. I'll never forget it because it was one of those times when you don't act because all of your emotions just come out. Both of them knew this was the end of something special. Whatever came next, they'd never have this again. This particular family, this particular show, this particular moment in time. For Sally Struthers, leaving wasn't quite the smooth transition she'd hoped for. Reality set in pretty quickly. I found out life's not a breeze, that you can't bet on anything, she admitted in later interviews. I started being treated like I was a newcomer, and I had to prove myself all over again. That's a hard thing. You think you've made it, and then you realize that at dinner tables all over Beverly Hills, you're part of a conversation that goes, whatever happened to Sally Struthers? She did land work, but Hollywood had a way of pigeonholing actors. She'd try for dramatic roles, but casting directors saw Gloria Bunker. She starred in her own spin-off show called Gloria in 1982, where her character was divorced from Mike and trying to make it as a single mother. It lasted 1 season. The show just didn't click without the rest of the family dynamic. Struthers found better success in voice acting. She became Rebecca Cunningham on Disney's Tailspin and Charlene Sinclair on Dinosaurs. Years later, younger audiences discovered her as Babette on Gilmore Girls, reuniting her with Liz Torres, who'd also appeared on All in the Family. But the role that made her famous, Gloria, in her platform shoes and 1970s fashion, arguing with her father and standing by her husband, that's the one that followed her everywhere. She also became famous for something else entirely. Those Christian Children's Fund commercials that ran constantly on television throughout the 1980s and 1990s. If you watched daytime TV back then, you remember Sally Struthers talking about sponsoring children in developing countries. It became such a part of popular culture that South Park parodied it years later. Rob Reiner, meanwhile, transformed into one of Hollywood's most successful directors. With help from Norman Lear, he made This Is Spinal Tap in 1984, the mockumentary that became a cult classic. Then came a remarkable run: Stand By Me in 1986, The Princess Bride in 1987, When Harry Met Sally in 1989, Misery in 1990, and A Few Good Men in 1992. He founded Castle Rock Entertainment and produced films and television shows for years, including a little show called Seinfeld. But no matter what Reiner accomplished, he never quite escaped meathead. At the 2024 Emmy Awards, he and Sally Struthers reunited on stage to pay tribute to Norman Lear. The audience gave them a standing ovation. They'd been part of something bigger than themselves, and everyone knew it. Number 5. Gene Stapleton.
Remember me? Yeah, sure, Doris Day.
No, Louise Jefferson.
If Rob and Sally's departure signaled change, Gene Stapleton's exit a year later in 1979 marked the true end of All in the Family as America knew it. Edith Bunker wasn't just a character. She was the emotional center of gravity, the person who kept the Bunker household from flying apart. Without her, the show became something else entirely. Stapleton had created something remarkable with Edith. She'd won 3 Emmy Awards and 2 Golden Globes for the role, and she'd turned what could have been a one-dimensional dumb wife character into someone infinitely more complex. Yes, Edith seemed ditzy. Yes, Archie called her dingbat and dismissed her thoughts. But viewers saw what Archie couldn't. Edith was often the wisest person in the room, the one who understood human nature better than anyone else, the one whose kindness and patience held the family together. Stapleton had developed that distinctive voice for Edith, high-pitched, a little nasal, with a Queen's accent that was pitch perfect. She'd worked in theater for decades before All in the Family, doing both Broadway and off-Broadway shows. She knew how to build a character from the ground up, and Edith Bunker was her masterpiece. By 1979, though, things were different. Sally and Rob had left at the end of season 8. The show had introduced a new character, Stephanie Mills, played by young Danielle Brisebois, Edith's 9-year-old niece whose father had abandoned her on the Bunker doorstep. The dynamic had shifted, and Stapleton, who'd been with the show from its first episode in January 1971, was ready to move on. The rumors started almost immediately. Some reports said she'd quit in anger, that there had been some falling out with Norman Lear or Carol O'Connor. Those rumors bothered Stapleton deeply. She felt the need to set the record straight. "Quit makes it sound as if I was leaving in anger or with something unfinished," she explained to reporters. "I love Edith. She changed my life." But loving Edith wasn't enough to keep her playing Edith forever. "So far, by doing other things in the summer, I've kept my identity as an actress separate," she said. "But I was afraid if I went on as Edith, I'd never lose her." She wanted to be seen as Jean Stapleton, the actress, not just as Edith Bunker. And she understood correctly that the longer she stayed, the harder it would be to break free from that association. Norman Lear didn't want her to leave. He tried everything to convince her to stay. He offered more money, a lot more money. He offered creative control, more say in storylines, whatever she wanted. But Stapleton's mind was made up. This was her moment to leave, while the show was still successful. While she could make the choice on her own terms, she'd already made one big financial decision that would haunt her for years. Early in the show's run, Stapleton and the other main cast members had given up their residual rights, the payments actors get when a show airs in syndication, in exchange for an upfront cash payout. At the time, it seemed like a good deal. Nobody knew that All in the Family would become one of the most syndicated shows in television history, playing on channels around the world for decades. That decision cost Stapleton and the others millions upon millions of dollars, but Stapleton had her reasons for not chasing money. Later, she turned down another enormous paycheck when she was offered the lead role in a new show called Murder, She Wrote. The role eventually went to Angela Lansbury, and Murder, She Wrote ran for 12 seasons from 1984 to 1996, making Lansbury extremely wealthy. If Stapleton had taken that role, she would have made tens of millions more than she ultimately earned. She said no because she didn't want to be locked into another long-running television series. She'd just escaped one golden cage. She wasn't climbing into another. The show continued without her as Archie Bunker's Place, which ran from 1979 to 1983. In the storyline, Edith had died from a stroke. The episode where this was revealed, Archie Alone, is one of the most heartbreaking in sitcom history. Archie comes home to an empty house and finds one of Edith's slippers. He sits in his chair, holding the slipper, and the grief just pours out of him. Carol O'Connor's performance in that moment showed exactly what the show had lost. Stapleton made guest appearances on Archie Bunker's Place a few times, but those were flashback sequences. Edith was gone, and the show was never the same. After leaving All in the Family, Stapleton did what she'd always wanted to do. She worked when she wanted to work, on projects that interested her. She appeared in television movies throughout the 1980s and 1990s. She had a memorable role as the Bagel Lady in You've Got Mail in 1998, appearing opposite Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. She guest starred on shows like Grace Under Fire, Murphy Brown, Everybody Loves Raymond, and Touched by an Angel. She and her husband William Putch ran a summer theater in Pennsylvania for 3 decades, producing plays and bringing live theater to their community. That work meant more to her than any television show ever could. She'd come from theater, and she'd never really left it. Stapleton also made some smart real estate investments in Manhattan, buying property when it was still affordable and holding on to it as values skyrocketed. Between that and her careful management of her money, she built a comfortable life for herself and her family. When Jean Stapleton passed away on May 31st, 2013, at the age of 90, she died peacefully at home. Her 2 children, Pamela and John Putch, released a statement. Being the children of a beloved mother on television means sharing the spirit of who Jean Stapleton was with her friends and fans. It is with great love and heavy hearts that we say farewell to our collective mother with a capital M. Tributes poured in from across the industry, but perhaps the most fitting tribute came from ordinary viewers who'd invited her into their living rooms every week for 9 years, who'd loved Edith Bunker and never forgot her. Jean Stapleton had made her choice back in 1979, and she'd lived with it happily. She'd worked on her own terms, kept her artistic integrity, and left her family comfortable. More importantly, she'd left behind a character who would live forever in television history. Number 4. Sherman Hemsley and Isabel Sanford.
Looking for a job. They are last on the list.
No, they ain't. The Puerto Ricans are last.
George and Louise Jefferson didn't exactly leave All in the Family in the traditional sense. They graduated. In 1975, Norman Lear gave them their own show, and the Jeffersons became one of the most successful spin-offs in television history, running for 11 seasons and 253 episodes. But their departure from the original show marked a significant shift in the Bunker household dynamic. Sherman Hemsley's path to playing George Jefferson was unusual from the start. When Norman Lear first approached him about the role in 1971, Hemsley was starring on Broadway in the musical Purlie. He'd worked hard to get there, growing up in South Philadelphia, dropping out of high school after 10th grade, joining the Air Force, then working for the U.S. Postal Service while attending the Academy of Dramatic Arts at night. Broadway was the dream he'd been chasing for years. Lear made him an offer Hemsley couldn't accept right away. played George Jefferson on this new show called All in the Family. Hemsley was reluctant to leave Pearlie, to give up his Broadway run for a television show that might not even last a full season. But Lear understood. He made Hemsley a promise. He'd hold the role open until Hemsley was ready. For 2 years, from 1971 to 1973, Hemsley stayed on Broadway while another actor, Mel Stewart, played George's brother Henry Jefferson on All in the Family. Henry would make a few appearances, then quietly move to Chicago in the storyline, making room for George to eventually arrive. Hemsley finally joined the cast in 1973, and from his very first entrance, George Jefferson became a force to be reckoned with. He and Archie Bunker were mirror images of each other. Both bigoted, both stubborn, both absolutely convinced they were right about everything. The difference was that George was successful. His chain of dry cleaning stores was making real money, and he wasn't shy about letting people know it. The genius of George Jefferson was that he challenged viewers' assumptions. He wasn't poor, he wasn't struggling, he wasn't grateful or patient or willing to accept second-class status. He was loud, ambitious, and unapologetically successful. Sherman Hemsley played him with a strut in his walk and fire in his eyes, and audiences couldn't get enough of him. Isabel Sanford had already lived a full life before she became Louise Jefferson. Born in New York City in 1917, she joined Harlem's American Negro Theater after graduating high school. She made her stage debut in 1946 and spent over 30 years working on Broadway and off-Broadway. In 1960, after separating from her husband, she moved to Los Angeles with her 3 children and started building a television and film career. Her big break came in 1967 when she was cast in the film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, the groundbreaking Sidney Poitier film about interracial marriage. Norman Lear saw her in that movie and knew she'd be perfect for Louise Jefferson. As Wheezy, Sanford created a character who was everything George wasn't: patient, kind, diplomatic. Where George would storm into a room making demands, Louise would smooth things over. Where George would argue, Louise would find common ground. The relationship between Edith and Louise was one of the show's quiet triumphs. Here were 2 women from completely different backgrounds, married to 2 of the most difficult men on television, and they just liked each other. They'd have coffee together, talk about their husbands, laugh at the ridiculousness of it all. In a show that dealt with racial tension head-on, the friendship between Edith and Louise suggested something hopeful about the possibility of connection across racial lines. By 1975, the Jeffersons had appeared in enough episodes that they felt like a fully developed family. George's dry cleaning business had taken off. Their son Lionel was dating a woman whose father was white. The setup was there for something bigger. When Norman Lear proposed a spin-off, the premise was simple but powerful. George's success had earned the family a move to a luxury apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. They were, as the theme song famously put it, moving on up. The Jeffersons premiered on January 18, 1975, and became an instant hit. For 11 seasons, it explored race, class, marriage, and social mobility with the same sharp wit that All in the Family had pioneered. George's bombastic personality played perfectly against Louise's grace. Their interracial neighbors, Tom and Helen Willis, provided storylines that pushed boundaries. And Florence, their sarcastic maid played by Marla Gibbs, became a breakout character in her own right. Sherman Hemsley received multiple Golden Globe and Emmy nominations for playing George Jefferson, though he never won during the Jeffersons' run. George Jefferson's walk, his voice, his whole attitude became something people imitated and celebrated. He was proof that a black character could be successful, flawed, funny, and unapologetic all at once. Isabel Sanford made history on September 13, 1981, when she won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series, becoming the first black actress to win in that category. She was 64 years old and had been working as an actress for 35 years. When the Jeffersons ended in 1985, both Hemsley and Sanford continued working, occasionally reprising their roles in commercials and on shows like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Isabel Sanford passed away on July 9, 2004, at the age of 86. Sherman Hemsley died on July 24, 2012 at 74 from lung cancer complications. His burial was delayed nearly 4 months while lawyers fought over his estate. He'd left everything to his best friend Flora Isola Enchinton rather than his biological family. After a bitter trial, Hemsley was finally laid to rest at Fort Bliss National Cemetery with military honors on November 21, 2012. Number 3, Mike Evans.
Know anything about the Willis's moving, and it was all my doing, all right? Well, we just have to undo your doing and move out of here.
Before there was George Jefferson on All in the Family, there was his son Lionel. And before the Jeffersons existed as a show, Mike Evans was bringing Lionel to life as the first member of the Jefferson family to appear on screen. Evans had zero acting experience when he landed the role. Norman Lear originally wanted Cleavon Little from Blazing Saddles, but the casting director thought Little was too edgy. They needed someone who could challenge Archie Bunker's thinking without seeming threatening. Evans, a college drama major, got a tip about the audition while hitchhiking. He showed up, read for the part, and got it. From 1971 to 1975, Evans played Lionel on All in the Family. His character was significant for being one of the first portrayals of a young, opinionated black man on television who wasn't defined by struggle. Lionel was smart, educated, and heading toward a career as an electrical engineer. He remained unfazed by Archie's bigotry, often playing along with stereotypes just to mess with Archie's head, saying things like, "I'm gonna be electrical engineer," in an exaggerated accent before dropping it completely and speaking in his normal, educated voice. It drove Archie crazy, and audiences loved it. When the Jeffersons launched in 1975, Evans moved to the spin-off, but something was bothering him. When the show started, Lionel had no last name, he told journalist Dan Lewis. Now, he not only has a last name, but the family name is the title of the new series. George and Louise were getting all the screen time, and Evans felt sidelined. There was another reason Evans left after just one season. He'd co-created another Norman Lear show called Good Times with Eric Monty. It was one of the first sitcoms to feature a primarily African-American cast, and Evans was heavily involved in writing for it. The workload was crushing. Eventually, he had to choose, and writing won out. Damon Evans, no relation, replaced Mike as Lionel for 4 seasons. Mike took roles in Rich Man, Poor Man, and The Practice, but by 1977, he'd largely stepped away from acting. In 1979, something pulled Evans back. He returned to The Jeffersons for the 8th season. He wanted to show America a young black man who was married, working on his master's degree, and ready to start a family. Eventually, the writers wrote both Lionel and his wife Jenny out of the show. Evans made 2 final guest appearances in 1985. After that, Mike Evans disappeared from television. He married, raised his daughters, and lived quietly. On December 14, 2006, he died of throat cancer at his mother's home in 29 Palms, California. He was 57 years old. Number 2. Bea Arthur.
Are you waiting for a special invitation? I said breakfast is on the table.
Bea Arthur's run on All in the Family was brief, but it was explosive enough to launch one of the most successful spin-offs in television history. Arthur first appeared as Maude Findlay, Edith's feminist cousin, in December 1971. The episode was called Cousin Maude's Visit, and Maude came to help when the Bunkers were sick with flu. But she didn't just help, she took over. Where Edith was soft-spoken and deferential, Maude was loud, opinionated, and utterly unafraid of Archie. The chemistry was electric. Norman Lear saw an opportunity. By September 1972, Maude had her own show. It ran for 6 seasons and tackled issues even more controversial than All in the Family dared to touch. A 1972 2-part episode dealt with Maude's decision to have an abortion. She was 47 years old and already had grown children. The episode caused a national uproar, but the show kept pushing boundaries. Arthur's performance earned her an Emmy in 1977. Arthur had already won a Tony Award in 1966 for Mame on Broadway. After Maude ended in 1978, she went on to play Dorothy Zbornak on The Golden Girls from 1985 to 1992. That role earned her another Emmy. She continued working into her 80s, doing voice work on Futurama and Malcolm in the Middle, and even returned to Broadway in 2002. She died in 2009 from lung cancer at age 86. Number 1. Betty Garrett and Vincent Gardenia.
I scream for you. Hello, everybody. May I come in?
2 other notable cast members left during the show's run, though their departures were less dramatic. Betty Garrett joined All in the Family in 1973 as Irene Lorenzo, appearing in 24 episodes over 3 seasons. She'd been blacklisted during the McCarthy era in the 1950s, which derailed what should have been a bigger career. The role on All in the Family gave her steady work as she rebuilt her career. She later appeared on Laverne and Shirley and Archie Bunker's Place, working steadily until her death in 2011 at age 91. Vincent Gardenia appeared as Irene Irene's husband Frank Lorenzo in 10 episodes between 1971 and 1973. He left to pursue a film career that would earn him 2 Academy Award nominations, for Bang the Drum Slowly in 1973 and Moonstruck in 1987. He won a Tony Award in 1972 for The Prisoner of Second Avenue. When Gardenia died of a heart attack in 1992 at age 72, his show was performing its final performance that night, dedicated to his memory. All in the Family didn't just lose cast members, it lost pieces of what made it revolutionary. When Mike and Gloria left, the show lost the generational conflict. When Edith left, it lost its heart. When the Jeffersons moved on up, it lost neighbors who challenged Archie in ways no one else could. But that's television. Nothing stays the same forever. The actors who left went on to create new shows, direct classic films, and build lives beyond Queens. Some found greater success. Others struggled to escape the shadows of the characters who'd made them famous. What they all shared was being part of something that changed television forever. All in the Family was a mirror held up to America, and for 9 years, it refused to look away. If you enjoyed this look back at All in the Family, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment and let us know. Which departure surprised you the most? We'll see you in the next video.